Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to start our section on the legislative branch of the government. Now we've ended our section on elections and the election process, the Electoral College and all of that, so now we probably will be mentioning those things going forward in future lessons, but we're going to start talking about and focusing on the three branches of government. And the first one that we are going to talk about is the legislative branch of the government. So, the role of Congress in a democracy. The framers of the Constitution were well versed in the history of government. They knew that throughout world history, heads of state, usually kings, often abused their power. Indeed, the list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence was aimed squarely at King George III. The history of the present King of Britain, wrote Thomas Jefferson, is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. Now, in case you don't know what a usurpation is, someone is considered a usurper if they overuse their authority. If they apply their authority to things that really shouldn't be, that they don't really have the power to do. That's what a usurpation is. The Declaration of Independence said of George III, "He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people." So, as you can tell, they did not like King George III whenever they were writing the Declaration of Independence. Representative assemblies. Because of this distrust of a powerful executive, coupled with an emerging view that just governments derive their powers from the will of the people, the colonists put great stock in representative assemblies. As alarms about oppression by the British government grew, sentiments like "no taxation without representation" reflected this belief. The nation's first such assembly was the Second Continental Congress, which governed the nation from the Declaration of Independence until the Confederation Congress convened in 1781, and was composed of delegates from every colony. National government. The individual colonies, and later states, put their faith in this representative body to guide them through both war with Great Britain and the United States' early days as a sovereign nation. Even so, the framers worried about vesting too much power in a body chosen directly by the people. The average citizen can be overly passionate and driven by self-interest, they argued. So they designed a national government that couched the legislature's powers within both a broader system of checks and balances and a federal system where a good deal would be left to the states. It would be the job of each representative to enlarge and refine the public views, as suggested by James Madison in the Federalist No. 10. That is, to help citizens look beyond their immediate interests to the national interest. So, the original view of Congress was to, while still adhering to the wills and the whims of their constituents, which are the people that they are representing, they are supposed to refine the public views and try to figure out a solution that balances not just the immediate interest of the people, but the national interest. What is good for the country as a whole is what the Congress's job is supposed to be. One leading commentary on American politics describes Congress and the job of a member of Congress this way. Congress has a split personality. On the one hand, it is a lawmaking institution and makes policy for the entire nation. In this capacity, all the members are expected to set aside their personal ambitions and perhaps even the concerns of their constituencies. Once again, that means the people they are representing. Yet Congress is also a representative assembly made up of 535 elected officials who serve as links between their constituents and the national government. The dual roles of making laws and responding to constituents' demands forces members to balance national concerns against the specific interests of their states or districts. James M. Burns, Government by the People. House Speaker John Boehner and President Barack Obama shake hands on the floor of the House. The framers envisioned Congress as a body whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country. So the framers, the founding fathers, wanted Congress to be made up of wise, intelligent people who would be able to take what their people want and frame it in a way that is for the best interest of the nation. Okay, here's a chart that talks about the different roles of a member of Congress and describes their duties. Whenever you are filling out your notes, you might want to take a look at that chart, but I'm not going to talk through that chart. The next few slides kind of explain this chart. So whenever you're filling out your role, or filling out your notes, you might want to take a look at this chart. Representatives of the people. Senators and representatives are elected to represent the people. What does that really mean? The members of both houses cast hundreds of votes during each session of Congress. Many of those votes involve quite routine, relatively unimportant matters. For example, a bill to designate a week in May as National Wildflower Week. But many of those votes, including some on matters of organization and procedure, do involve questions of far-reaching importance. Therefore, no questions about the lawmaking branch can be more vital than these. How do the people's representatives represent the people? On what basis do they cast their votes? In broadest terms, each lawmaker has 4 voting options. He or she can vote as a delegate, a trustee, a partisan, or a politico. And we're going to talk about each of those. Delegates see themselves as the agents of the people who elected them. They believe that they should discover what the folks back home think about an issue and vote that way. They are often willing to suppress their own views, ignore those of their party's leadership, and turn a deaf ear to the arguments of their colleagues and of special interests from outside their constituencies. That's a delegate. A trustee believes that each question they face must be decided on its own merits. Conscience and judgment are their guides. They reject the notion that they must act as robots or rubber stamps. Instead, they call issues as they see them, regardless of the views held by a majority of their constituents or by any of their other groups that seek to influence their decision. So, a delegate, a person who wants to act as a delegate, they think about what the people that they are representing would want, vote that way. A trustee sees themselves, they were elected because the people trust them to use their wisdom to make the best decision. So a person that sees themselves as a trustee may not exactly go along with what the constituents may think is best, but they feel that they are going to use their own wisdom, their own knowledge to make the best decision for their people. Partisans. Partisans believe that they owe their first allegiance to their political party. They feel duty-bound to cast their votes in line with the party platform and the views of their party's leaders. Most studies of legislators' voting behavior indicate that partisanship is the leading factor influencing lawmakers' votes on most important questions. So, a partisan is a person who, well, I am a Republican, so I'm going to see what the Republican Party wants me to vote, and I'm going to vote that way. That is how a partisan would look at it. Politicos attempt to combine the basic elements of the delegate, trustee, and partisan roles. They try to balance these often conflicting factors, their own view of what is best for their constituents and/or the nation as a whole, the political facts of life, and the peculiar pressures of the moment. So, the last one is probably the most conflicting and the most difficult to describe. They try to balance everything. They try to use their own knowledge, they try to think of what the people would want, and they also pay attention to what the political party they represent would want. So a politico is a person that tries to find a balance between all things, and it can be rather difficult to do. Current trends. Which model is the most popular today? Scholars generally agree that a growing number of legislators adhere to the delegate model, meaning the delegate model being the one that tries to vote best in line with the people that they represent would want. This fact is largely due to the marvels of modern-day polling, which give legislators, the media, and voters a much clearer picture of the will of the people than was possible in the past. In addition, the internet has given constituents the ability to check the voting records of their legislators with a few quick clicks, making lawmakers much more accountable to the public than in earlier times. think back to the colonial days. If you were a cowboy out in the Wild West, are you really going to be able to keep track of what people in D.C. are voting? Probably not. It's going to take forever for news to even get to you. And if you're a person that's only concerned with herding your cattle and trying to sell them, well, it probably, you're not even going to pay attention to what's happening in D.C. Nowadays, if one person says something wrong in the Senate, well, everybody in the country can know about it in less than 10 minutes. So just the way that information gets around today is so much easier and quicker than it was in years past, that the people can view what their legislators are doing much more easily. Finally, today's senators and representatives often enter Congress with the goal of remaining in Washington for years to come. Throughout the nation's early history, a stint in the House or Senate was viewed as a public service, and legislators returned to private life after a few terms. Today, however, lawmakers often view membership in Congress as a long-term career, giving rise to a new era that has been dubbed the rise of career legislators. And of course, the surest way to stay in office is to rarely, if ever, buck public opinion. This fact makes voting as a delegate of the people much more important than it was in the past. People that get into Congress today often look at it as their career. That's what they're going to do. Originally, the framers and the founding fathers did not view being a legislator as a career path. They thought of it like a public service. So that's an attitude that has changed drastically from our nation's early days to today. Committee members. In every session of Congress, proposed laws, known as bills, are referred to the various committees in each chamber. As committee members, senators and representatives must screen those proposals. They decide in committee which measures will go on to floor consideration, that is, be considered and acted upon by the full membership of the House or Senate. Although Congress enacts laws and appropriates the money to implement them, the Constitution assigns the task of executing those laws to the executive branch. Congress must see that executive agencies carry out those laws faithfully and spend that money properly. It does so through the exercise of its critically important oversight function, the process by which Congress, through its committees, checks to see that the executive branch agencies are carrying out the policies that Congress has set by law. So that is one of the functions of Congress. Personal and political background. The 535 members of Congress are not a representative cross-section of the American people. Rather, the average member is a white male in his late 50s. The average age of members of the House is 57 and about 62 for those in the Senate. So on average, Congress people tend to be older. The composition of Congress is gradually becoming more diverse. For example, the 113th Congress included the largest number of women in history. 81 women served in the House of Representatives, up from 23 only 25 years before. Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat from California, who became the first woman Speaker of the House in 2007, was elected Minority Leader. 20 women sat in the Senate, whereas only 39 women had served in all years previously combined. The 113th Congress was also notable for its inclusion of the first 2 women combat veterans to be elected to office. So, over time, Congress is becoming more diverse. A wider variety of people are being elected into Congress. For many years, it was just white men only. For many, many years. And over time, more and more diversity is coming into Congress. In addition, the Congress included 42 African Americans and 35 Hispanics in the House, as well as 11 Asian Americans, 2 Native Americans, and 1 Pacific Islander. 3 Hispanics and 1 Asian sat in the Senate, including the first ever Asian American woman. 1 African American served in the upper house, but only 6 had ever held seats in that body. Nearly all members were married, a few were divorced, and they had, on average, 2 children. Only a very few members said they had no religious affiliation. Over half were Protestant, nearly 3 in 10 were Roman Catholics, less than 1 in 10 were Jewish, 3 were Buddhist, 2 were Muslim, 1 was a Quaker, and 1 was Hindu. So that goes to show that religious diversity is also coming into the Congress, which I think is very important. Well over a third of the members of the House and over half the senators were lawyers. 94% had a college degree and 2/3 had advanced degrees. Most senators and representatives were born in the states they represented. Only a handful were born outside the United States. Sprinkled among the members of Congress were several millionaires. A surprisingly large number of the men and women who sat in the House depended on their congressional salaries as their major source of income, however. So, we're seeing that to get into Congress, typically you have to be older, you have to have a college degree or an advanced degree, and there are several people who are quite wealthy that make it into Congress. Now, it's not required that you be a wealthy person to make it into Congress, but as we talked about in being elected costs a lot of money because running a campaign costs a lot of money. So typically people who have more money are able to run a more far-reaching campaign and are better able to be elected. Most members of Congress have had considerable political experience. The average senator is serving a second term and the typical representative has served 4 terms. Approximately 1/2 of the senators once sat in the House. Several senators are former governors. A few senators have held cabinet seats or other high posts in the executive branch of the federal government. The House includes a large number of former state legislators and prosecuting attorneys among its members. Again, Congress is not an accurate cross-section of the nation's population. Rather, it is made up of the upper middle class Americans who are, on the whole, quite able and hardworking people. So, while Congress is not this perfect snapshot of what America is, it is made up of people who tend to be upper middle class and who are usually more educated people and have higher degrees and a lot of the times higher incomes. Okay guys, that's going to end it for this video. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. You know that I am holding my office hours from 4 to 5 o'clock on Wednesdays and Thursdays. If you click that office hours link in the class homepage, it'll tell you how to get connected. So if you have any questions, send them to me in all the normal ways that you guys already know. So I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.